بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Inshallah ta'ala, everybody is doing well. And I want to remind you that even whenever you are going through difficulties or hardships, always keep in mind that you have many, numerous blessings, and you are to thank Allah for these blessings. And thank Allah that your difficulty is not worse than it is. And if it is in something related to a worldly matter, for example, something related to your body, to your health, to your financial situation, at least it is not related to your belief. So whenever you're going through hardships, try to focus on the many, many blessings that you have, and think of all the people who are going through more difficulties. So you know then that you are blessed with numerous endowments. So don't focus on the hardship. Try to focus rather on the plenty of endowments that Allah Ta'ala granted us with without Him being obligated to do so. Remember, nothing is obligatory on Allah. Inshallah Ta'ala, we will continue with the third category. And the third category is the apostate sayings. When we say apostate sayings, meaning they are said with the tongue. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, أكثر خطايا ابن آدم من لسانه. It means most of the sins committed by the son of Adam are because of his tongue. And the scholars say that the tongue is small in size, yet it might lead the person to destruction. Even though it is small in size, but it might lead the person into hellfire. It might lead into destruction. And they also said it is very easy to use your tongue. You know, it doesn't require much effort. It's not like you are lifting something heavy with your strength and you feel tired. No, you notice many people talk a lot, and whoever is listening to them might think, aren't you tired of talking so much? Subhanallah, some people talk a lot and they are not cautious as to what they are saying. Is this halal to say? Is it lawful? Is it sinful? They just talk. So the Prophet ﷺ also informed us that we will be judged for that what we are saying. So even though it is very easy for us to speak, but really we should be cautious and think before we speak. Now, I will be mentioning some examples that the scholars enumerated in their textbooks. But of course, you can imagine examples of sayings, of things that are kufr, there are plenty. And we're only giving examples following the methodology of the scholars. They gave some examples of this category as well, because we said, whoever does not know evil might fall into it. So the scholars give examples to warn people that these are examples of kufr, stay away from them and stay away from what is similar to them as well. Now, I want you please to listen carefully and wait until I have said each example until the end, because sometimes the condition is mentioned at the end. Okay, so sometimes the restriction might be mentioned at the end of the statement. So the third category then is sayings, and there are too many to be counted, but we are mentioning some examples. Among these examples is to say to a Muslim, a person whom one knows is a Muslim. Okay, so to say to a Muslim, O Kafir, or O Jew, or O Christian, or O you without a religion, meaning by that the religion of the addressed person is kufr, Judaism, Christianity, or not a religion. Even though one knows that this person is a Muslim. When a person is Muslim and you know that this person is Muslim, it is very dangerous to call this person a non-Muslim. And vice versa. If a person is not a Muslim, you know he is not a Muslim, it is very dangerous to call this person a Muslim when you know he is not a Muslim. Okay? So, in this example that I just mentioned, it is if you know, if a person knows of another who is Muslim, he knows him to be a Muslim, yet despite that, he calls him a kafir, or he says you are without a religion, or oh Jew, Jews are not Muslims, or he says oh you Christian, Christians are not Muslims. If he says that, he becomes a non-Muslim, except if he says that with the purpose of likening him to those non-Muslims. In this case, he does not become a kafir by that. However, it is not permissible to do that. So I'll mention the exception again. The exception is if he says that to him while knowing that he's a Muslim. He says that to him with the purpose of likening him to non-Muslims. Why? Because of a behavior, for example, that he did. Maybe because he mistreats Muslims like the disbelievers, like the kuffar, the disbelievers, mistreat the Muslims. So because he sees him in his behavior mistreating Muslims like the kafir do to Muslims, and because of that, he told him, oh, you without a religion. With that purpose. In this case, he does not become a kafir for calling him a kafir or a person without a religion, if it is with that purpose. Nevertheless, this is not permissible to do. Okay, it's still not allowed to call a Muslim as a non-Muslim or a kafir or a Jew or a Christian when we know that this person is a Muslim. Okay, the second example we will mention is to ridicule, meaning to make fun of, to ridicule one of the names of Allah, his promise, or his threat by a person who is not ignorant that these matters are confirmed by Allah. So if a person knows that this is one of the names of Allah, and despite that he mocks it, he becomes a non-Muslim. And also if one belittles the promise of Allah, Allah Ta'ala promised the believers with paradise. Paradise is the abode of everlasting enjoyment. Okay, so if a person belittles that and says, for example, about paradise that it is a little toy for children, he's belittling paradise by that. So if a person belittles paradise, he becomes a non-Muslim by that. Also, if a person belittles the threat of Allah, Allah threatened the kuffar with hellfire, and the torture of hellfire is severe, is enormous. If a person makes fun of that and says, oh, hellfire is no big deal, we will be cozy in it, we will be cozy and warm in it. If a person belittles the threat of Allah, he becomes a non-Muslim by that. Another example of apostate saying is if a person says, if Allah ordered me with such a matter, I would not do that. Or if he says, if the qibla, the direction of prayer, was changed to such a direction, I would not pray towards it, out of belittlement and showing stubbornness. So here is the restriction. Here is the reason why. If the person says it with belittlement, okay? Or if somebody says, if Allah punishes me for leaving out prayers, despite my sickness, he would wrong me. this is for sure kufr. For Allah Ta'ala is not attributed with injustice. Whatever Allah Ta'ala decrees, as we said, there is wisdom behind it. And if Allah Ta'ala punishes a slave, this is just from Allah. God is not attributed with injustice. Whoever attributes injustice to God, he would become a non-Muslim. And brothers and sisters, even when the Muslim is sick, he's still obligated to pray, okay? There's still, if he's accountable, he still is obligated with the prayer, even if the person is sick. And the scholars mention details pertaining to this matter. Inshallah ta'ala, when we talk about the chapter of prayer and purification, we will talk more about some of these details. So, if a person attributes injustice to Allah, he becomes a non-Muslim, okay? Like some people who object to Allah when they lose their family members. If a person loses a family member, or if a person is inflicted with a calamity, and he objects to Allah, and he attributes injustice to Allah, he becomes a non-Muslim by that, okay? Another example is if somebody says about a matter that it happened without the predestining of Allah. Because remember, we said among the fundamentals of the belief is to believe that everything happens by the will of Allah. Everything happens in accordance to the predestining of Allah, in accordance to the knowledge of Allah. Nothing happens except if Allah Ta'ala willed for it. So, if a person says about anything that it happened without Allah willing for that to happen, he becomes a non-Muslim by that, okay? Another example is if a person says, if the prophets or the angels or all Muslims testified before me that something is so, I would not accept it from them. This is clearly kufr, because this person would be belying the prophets. He would be belying the angels. And the angels do not lie. The prophets do not lie. Also, all Muslims will not agree on a lie, okay? Another example is to say with the purpose of belittlement, with the purpose of degrading, mockery, with the purpose of belittlement. If somebody says, I will not do that even if it is recommended sunnah. There are matters in the religion that are recommended to do, that are sunnah to do. If a person does them because they are sunnah to do, then this is rewardable. This is good. And if a person does not want to do them, okay, he doesn't do them. But one should not belittle them. I will give you an example. Using the siwak, the toothstick, the siwak is sunnah. I think you know what I'm talking about. Usually it's made out of wood. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned many benefits of using the siwak to clean the mouth with. So when a person knows that this is sunnah, and despite that, the person belittles it, makes fun of it, in this case, he commits kufr by that, okay? Also, if one knows that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to eat with 3 fingers, okay? If he does not want to do that, his thing, he doesn't want to do that. It's not an obligation, but it is sunnah to eat with 3 fingers. If a person makes fun of that, for example, if he says this is disgusting, he belittles this, he makes fun of this, then when he knows that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that this is good to do, in this case, he commits kufr. Okay? So here, it is with the condition that this person knows that this matter is sunnah. It is recommended in the religion. Another example is to say when a scholar issues a religious judgment, a fatwa, what is this law? With the purpose of belittling the Islamic judgment. So when a person is given a religious law that is true, that is correct in accordance to the rules of Islam, but the person does not accept it, and he says, what is this law? With the purpose of belittling the ruling of the Islamic judgment, in this case, he becomes a non-Muslim. Okay? Some people do not follow the rules of Islam. Of course, this is not good to do. But if they do not follow it and belittle it, this is where they commit kufr. Okay? For example, there are people who follow the rules of, for example, rules put by a particular government instead of following the rules of the religion of Islam. Of course, they are supposed to follow the rules of Islam. But if they do not follow the rule of Islam and belittle the rulings of the Islamic judgment, in this case, it is then kufr. Now, I'm going to mention this example, and it has 3 specific cases that I want you to pay due attention to, and I will explain it, inshallah. Among the apostate sayings is to say, may Allah's dam be upon every religious scholar, intending by it comprehensiveness, meaning all. However, if one did not intend to include all the religious scholars, but he meant specific scholars because of what he believes of their corrupt condition, their bad situation, and his statement was said within a context which indicates that this intended meaning, that he did not include all the religious scholars, in this case, it is not kufr, but it is not allowed to say it. Because the religious judgments, the rulings of Islam, they came to us through the scholars. So one is not to damn all the scholars of Islam. This is dangerous. We received the rules of Islam through the scholars, who received them through the scholars before them, who received them from the followers of the companions, the tabi'in, who received it from the companions, as-sahaba, who received it from the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So the Muslim is not to damn all the scholars of Islam. And I said the exception here. If he did not mean all of them, he did not intend all of them, he intended particular ones because of their corrupt condition, and within the statement, or the statement was said within a context that shows that the person did not intend all of them. For example, 2 people were talking to each other, and one of them mentioned particular people whose situation is bad, okay? So if it is then said within a context that shows that this person did not intend all scholars of Islam. Another example of apostate sayings is if one says, I do not acknowledge Allah, the angels, the Prophet, or the Islamic law. This is clear kufr. Or to say, I do not know the judgment, while ridiculing the judgment revealed by Allah. So if the person is saying this with this purpose, with the purpose of belittling the judgment, not when the person really does not know the judgment. How? If a person is asked about a matter and he does not know the judgment, then for sure he says, I do not know. So I will repeat. If a person knows that this is a judgment in the religion, but despite that, he belittles it, this is kufr. Whereas if a person is asked for the ruling and he says, I do not know, in this case, this is what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to say, I do not know, and not make up a ruling on his own. So if he says, I do not know, because he really does not know, and he does not mean belittling the Islamic ruling, then it is not kufr. Now, the scholars also mentioned among the apostate sayings is to mention verses of the Quran with the intention of belittling its meaning. Mentioning verses of the Quran with the intention of belittling the meaning of the verse is kufr. An example of that, if one says the verse, وَكَأْسًا دِهَاقًا, this is a verse in the Quran. If one mentions it after one has filled a cup, and his intention is to belittle the verse, in this case, he becomes a non-Muslim by that. The scholar said similarly, any occasion where a person quotes the verses of the Quran with this intention, meaning with the intention of belittling the meaning of the verse, then this is kufr. Another example is to say to a Muslim, I'm your enemy and the enemy of your prophet. Of course, this is clearly kufr because the prophet of this Muslim is Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. Even if he intends any other prophet, of course, calling any of the prophets an enemy would be kufr, okay? Also, to say anything similar to those aforementioned abhorrent and ugly statements. So, as we said, many jurists, fuqaha, they enumerated examples in their books so that the people are aware of such examples and they stay away from these blasphemous sayings. Let us mention the rule and end with stating the rule. And when the person understands the rule, this helps a lot. So then what is the rule? The scholar said the rule is that any belief in the heart or action or saying which indicates belittling Allah or his books, meaning the books revealed by Allah, or his prophets, or his angels, or his rights, the indicators of his religion, meaning the obvious matters known to be of the religion, like the prayer, the adhan, or the mosques, or his promise, or his threat is kufr. Okay? Belittling any of that is kufr. So one must use caution with the utmost effort. So one should be careful then. When we say the indicators of the religion, meaning the matters, the obvious matters known to be among the religion of Islam, such as the prayers, the obligatory prayers. Belittling them is kufr, or belittling the adhan, the call to the prayer. Belittling that is kufr, or the mosques, the masajid, for example. Belittling them is kufr. And Allah Ta'ala knows best.